On this special edition of Full-Time Roundup, with international break upon us, Daniel and Euan dive into a few of the great stars of the game currently and discuss whether their legacies will last and shine as bright as some of the former legends of the game. Hope you guys enjoy this episode of the Full-Time Roundup, and we will be back with you as usual on Sunday.
Welcome in, everybody. This is another edition of Full-Time Roundups, bonus episodes found on YouTube. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you're watching on YouTube, please press subscribe and like these videos so we know, if we're doing a good job with, some extra content here and there. If you're listening in podcast form, go ahead and rate us a 5-star and download the episode so we get some good metrics on who's listening and who is not. And of course, if you're on Twitter or X, follow us at Full-Time Roundup. Interact with us, like our stuff, ask us questions. If we missed anything, let us know. But on the other side of the screen here, from 3,000 miles away, we have Euan Reynard. You can find Euan at _UNR. I completely forgot our last podcast, but go check out, especially if you're in the U.S. in Charlotte, go check out the Crown Cast as they do fantastic Charlotte FC content, breaking down every game and previewing it as well. Euan, how are you?
I'm good. We're here to talk some pretty big picture stuff. So it's always exciting and fun to do. So yeah, pleasure to be here with you, man.
Absolutely. So we have a pretty interesting topic today. Last time we talked about the championship. So we're going to go more philosophical with this one. So we're going to go with Messi and Ronaldo. For at least our generation, were kind of the guys, right? And as we almost have the passing of the guard here, we have 2, 3, maybe 4 players that you could argue are up there or could get up there. And these 2 players that we're going to talk about today are Erling Haaland and Kylian Mbappe. So first, before we get started, I wanted to at least give, a couple players just their flowers that, eventually they could be on this list. But just for now, we're going to just talk about these 2. First, I'm going to start with Jude Bellingham. That's one player that I think could be looked at as a player like this, but with maybe a bigger sample size at Madrid, he will work his way into this conversation. Do you have one?
No, I think because Haaland and Mbappe are still quite young, it feels like you can only really say with them 2. Bellingham, obviously, yeah, you kind of got to give him the benefit of the doubt with that because he's so young and achieved so much. But yeah, it's such a high conversation that you almost don't just want to chuck a name in there. You kind of leave it to those guys to battle it out. But yeah, maybe someone will come up in the near future, these next few years, someone will make a jump. But yeah, I think having those 2 be the 2 main guys of this moment, and then Bellingham kind of hawking them down from the back is probably where it's at right now.
Absolutely. So we'll go ahead and dive right into it. So we're going to compare these players when they were at 24. And there is a slight caveat here. Erling Haaland doesn't turn 24 till July. So keep in mind that the season's not over for any of these players. Plus, Erling hasn't even turned 24. He's still 23 as of now. I'm actually like 3 months older than he is, which is pretty wild to think about. He is getting on in the Prem, and I am certainly not doing that. But all right, just to compare, Messi at 24 had 197 goals and 84 assists. Ronaldo had 132 goals and 66 assists. So Ronaldo kind of heated up the older he got, especially, making that move to Real Madrid. Messi staying with Barcelona just kind of ate and came right onto the scene. And currently, Mbappe has 253 goals and 132 assists, and Haaland has 235 goals and 48 assists. So Mbappe and Haaland have more goals than Messi and Ronaldo when they were 24. So is this more of the evolution of football, or is it is it something else? Like, am I missing out on something? Because I don't think these two players will probably end up being better, at least than Messi, if not both.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of in terms of those goal tallies being higher is the leagues that they were playing in, or at least the context of the teams that they played for. Those Haaland goal numbers, they'll include the Red Bull stuff. That obviously with the talent advantage that they have, the role he'd be playing, that's obviously going to be good for those numbers, as will playing for Man City in that system. Borussia Dortmund, obviously a good team, but not quite the advantage in terms of the context of the league as those two teams have. And then with Mbappe, I like Euan. It's a good league. I enjoy watching it. A lot of fascinating things there. But when it comes to the competitiveness at the top, it's not one that you would put up there as one which is all that exciting in terms of title races often. So him being at PSG gives him a good advantage to I'm trying to avoid the word pad stats, but I suppose that's kind of what it is when you play for a team like that. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that's just the opportunity that you get when you play for a top side. So that's maybe one of the things that I can come up with. People say, well, it wasn't like Messi and Ronaldo played for awful teams. No, they didn't. But I don't think the teams that they played for had the same dominance as Man City have had last season, at least in the Premier League, and winning the treble in the amount of games they played, and the dominance that PSG have had in Ligue 1. So I think you can give them a little bump for that. I don't think it's much of a bump. I think if you're going to give any reason for it, I think that's the bump that you give.
That's fair. And for me, at least, Mbappe seems like he's going to be on his way to Real Madrid this year. So it'll be a very good comparison to see when he does make that move for next season's numbers. Are they going to be as high? Do they get higher? Do they significantly drop off as he's playing probably better opponents in La Liga, but his team is also going to be better around him? Is he going to have to share the wealth a little bit and not just be the guy all the time like he is at PSG? These are kind of the arguments that can be made. When it comes to Haaland, I mean, this Pep team is just incredible. And the thing with Erling that's not as much with others is, yes, I mean, he's a freak of nature. He'll probably, score the most goals of anyone in recent memory throughout his career if he stays healthy. And this is all caveated by him staying healthy and, not burning out, which I don't think he will. But the difference between Erling and everyone else on this list is that Haaland can't do it himself. And I feel like all three other players have shown that they have that clutch gene and they can do it themselves when they need. They can pull themselves up from the bootstraps and just go get a goal, where I feel like Haaland is really just a byproduct of the nature around him and then his cutting edge in front of goal. Am I off on saying that?
Well, you mentioned that the pull by the bootstraps, the idea of them, being able to do certain things themselves. It's it's baked into their play style, especially with and to make that point with Haaland playing for Pep's Man City. It's very much a case of being between lines. Don't come out too far and be linking up play. We're good enough with that ourselves. We've got enough backline players committed to it. You stay in the box and you be the poacher, something that you're really good at. Compared with the play styles of Ronaldo, Messi, and Mbappe, where they are dropping deeper, they are wanting to get on the ball and bring it forward. Obviously, Ronaldo and Messi less so as they've aged, but in the peaks of their career, absolutely wanting to get on the ball as much as possible and drive it forward. I think that's the thing that comes really often when people say, if Erling Haaland wants to be the best player in the world, or if he can be viewed as maybe if people think he could be the greatest player of all time, the one thing that he hasn't got in his advantage is the fact that he doesn't play this, all-rounded style of getting on the ball so much. Like, he can score 2 goals in a game and touch the ball 15 times. Is that what you want in the best player in the world? Is that something that you think reflects the best player in the world? But that's become a product of the style of Man City, I think, a little bit. I think what people are forgetting is some of the stuff that he'd done at Dortmund. I don't think it's on the level of Mbappe, Ronaldo, Messi in terms of getting the ball and playmaking. But when he's able to get on the ball a little bit deeper and drive with it and get after people, he has a more rounded game than I think he gets credit for, just by the fact that Man City don't ask him to do those things. We're recording this the day after the Manchester derby. Haaland, obviously, he missed an absolute horrible open goal and missed some bad chances generally. He's not been in the best form recently. But what I wanted to say with it was that there was a moment in this game where he does actually have the opportunity to turn with his back to goal and run at the defence. I don't know if you remember this turned into a free kick. I think De Bruyne hits the wall off the back of it.
And then Varane fouls him or something.
Exactly. Yeah. He turns his man so easily, runs past Varane. And it's like Man City don't really ask him to do this. But God, if he was playing in a team that had to play this sort of style a little bit more, where the striker comes up a little bit and plays with his back to goal and has to turn and drive with it a little bit more forward. He's always on the last line usually, rather than turning with it and driving at a back line. But he's got it in his locker. He has a more rounded game than I think he is able to showcase with Man City. But that is almost it bakes into, the when you're comparing generations. Nowadays, coaches want players to play more refined roles. There aren't many players that are asked to do everything. It's very specified. So if that's something that is going to define players of this generation in those all-time conversations, it's unavoidable because coaching has gone to that place. And I don't think it's coming back. We just have to be better at contextualizing it, I think.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you're going to have to do when you compare legacies and generation in players like that. Now, I'm going to go off topic here, but I've been wondering what you think here, because I don't think Pep's style suits Haaland and what he is good at. I think Dortmund were very direct, and I think that played into Haaland's pace and getting forward. Personally, I think if Liverpool signed Haaland instead of Manchester City, I not only think that he'd have scored more goals, but I think he probably would have won the Ballon d'Or last year. Now, is that an outrageous statement, or do you think stylistically that a team like Liverpool matches more up for what Erling does well?
Yeah, I think they do match a little bit better for a style, and this stuff seems kind of crazy to say. We're not saying that him playing for Man City is an awful fit and it's not something that works.
Yes.
Obviously, we have the evidence that he can play that role for them. I think what we're saying here is if your only goal was to squeeze as much of the talent and ability out of Erling Haaland that he has, what would be the best team for him to do it for? And that probably is Liverpool. He would have more opportunity to get into those situations we mentioned there where he's driving at a back line. He'd have more freedom to dip in a little bit further back and have space to be able to play into. But what Liverpool are really good at is, Arsenal will camp in your half. Man City will camp in your half. Liverpool are an elite side, obviously, and will camp in your half often as a result of that. But they're good at manufacturing transition by the fact that they don't push everyone up to start with. They don't get really deep packed into your half. They can lull you into a sense of security of, we're letting you have a little bit of possession here. Then our press is triggered and now we go and we're attacking space. They're attacking space so much more often than Man City are. And like we mentioned, Erling Haaland is an absolute space eater. You can get him into space, that big body moving, them big legs. It's a ridiculous sight to see. And we just don't get it with Man City because it's not how they set up. He still has the qualities to score a load of goals for Man City and be effective for them. But if we're talking about a player where, as you mentioned, how do we want to get this guy's, or how do we want to show off the majority, the breadth of his game? Liverpool would probably be better suited for doing that. But at the same time, yeah, you can understand why he's at Manchester City because he's playing a bit more of a refined role. But ultimately, it's led him to being a treble winner. And I think every single player who goes to Man City, think about someone like Jack Grealish. Would he be more exciting? Would he have a better highlight reel? Would he be up for more awards if he was playing for another club? I think probably a good chance he would be. But he's playing that role in Manchester City where he's keeping the ball on the inside. He's always keeping vertical pressure. He's not taking on his man as often as he used to. He's playing within structure. He's sacrificed a lot for it in terms of statistics and maybe personal accolades and possibly a place in his national team side. But it's in exchange for an incredible amount of domestic success. And I guess it comes down to whether you want to make that bargain or not. And I suppose for most players, they probably do, at least for a certain period.
My next question is when it comes to comparing eras and obviously probably the best argument you can make about Messi and Ronaldo being the best of all time is the Ballon d'Ors. You know, I think it's like 8 or 7 to 6 to 8 each they have. Now Messi just won his last Ballon d'Or. I think it's safe to say, argue or not if he deserved it. I don't really care. I'm not having that conversation today. But they are, I know Haaland's 23, about to turn 24. Mbappe's a little bit older. How many Ballon d'Ors do you think they have to get to even enter that chat? Like, do you think it's like 3 or 4? Because I don't think they're going to do a 6 or 7 or 8, kind of like Messi and Ronaldo have done throughout the years.
No, they won't be getting up into that numbers, into those kind of numbers. I don't think anyone's probably going to get near Cristiano Ronaldo's number of Ballon d'Ors for a very, very long time. Never mind when you're talking about Messi's. So I don't think they'll be able to get near to that conversation. I also don't know if that's a way that it's framed as much. I think that almost feels like it's specified for Messi versus Ronaldo, that they were just going back and forth with them, and it was a good barometer for how those guys were measuring up against each other year on year. I think Mbappe, we mentioned with the style there, I think Mbappe will win more Ballon d'Ors than Haaland, just by the way that his style lends itself to it. I think obviously Haaland, I think he finished second in it last year. He was kind of the designated Manchester City nominee based off a team that won the treble, and they're not going to win the treble every year. So I suppose if he can't win it in a year they do, then it's going to be hard pressed for him to win it more than once if he has another crazy goal scoring season. Whereas Mbappe's style, like, you can easily see the idea of him going to Real Madrid, they win the Champions League, and it's like it's his time. It's time to give him his Ballon d'Or. I would probably, I mean, you know, we do a bit of betting on full-time roundup. There's setting over-unders and things like that. I think I would set the Mbappe over-under on Ballon d'Ors at 2.5, and I would probably just nudge the over. I'd go with him probably winning 3 by the end of his career, and say Haaland probably wins 1. But ultimately, what that means for their legacies, I'm not sure. I think with football, fans just kind of live more with moments and the memories and what they believe they saw in players more often than they do with those direct accolades that people lend a bit more cachet to in other sports. Like, I don't know off the top of my head how many Ballon d'Ors Zinedine Zidane has. I think it might be 1. I'm not sure how many it is. And it's also a kind of a stats conversation, because we started this off talking about the statistics. His stats aren't really that mind-blowing. But when you talk to people of that era, so many will say that he was the best. And he'll say, you know, what was it? It's just like, just watch him. Just watch what he was able to do. You're just gliding with the ball, the aesthetics of it. So that almost works as a perfect answer for what we talked about earlier in terms of Haaland, what he's able to do. It's impressive, a lot of numbers. Is it as easy on the eye? Is it going to win people over in that way into where they put him in that all-time top conversation that people like Zinedine Zidane and even someone less accomplished than him, like Ronaldinho, people love him. And I think people are a little bit too nostalgic about him. But ultimately, the reason they are nostalgic about him is because he may have had a bad game, not done a lot, but he was able to provide to do one thing that just kind of sticks with you. I think that's the kind of sport that football is.
It's how the player makes you feel, right? And I thought you had a lot of good insight in there. I'd probably agree. I also think what gives Kylian the edge is international football, even though it's played 20% of the year, I'd say, compared to club. It has probably arguably more of a weighting than the club season does. I feel like you could make an argument with that. And when it comes to international football, Mbappe obviously plays for France. Haaland plays for Norway. He has not been able to replicate that form for the national team. And then you have Kylian on the other hand, who has just been phenomenal the last 3 years, or probably longer. But he's developed a fairly large, not only trophy list at PSG, but as well as abroad. And he's probably, he's probably the clutchest player that I'd say as of right now, just with clutch gene. And that's what really, I mean, both Messi and Ronaldo were clutch, but I'd say Ronaldo on the biggest stages with the Euros and then with Champions League finals. Like, I feel like Ronaldo always stepped up when everyone needed him to. And Mbappe in that same way is just like that big game player where Haaland sometimes will disappear in the big game.
Yeah, the Ronaldo thing's a little bit funny because his when you stack everyone up and kind of put their arguments together with it, Ronaldo's is the Champions League. Like, he's the top scorer in it. He has more Champions League medals than Messi. But this isn't the way that I want to think about things. But like you mentioned it there, the idea that he was turning up in them big moments. He did generally, but I do sometimes think his record in finals is maybe a little bit overstated in terms of what he was able to do in Champions League finals. I remember the 2014 Champions League final, the one that ultimately brought La Decima, which was a big deal. And in that game, it was Gareth Bale who took the game by the scruff of the neck. And then if you think about, I think it was the year after, or the one, they won so many, so this is how it's hard to remember. But when they beat Atletico again, I believe in the final, it's Sergio Ramos who really was kind of the driving force of that game, unless I'm misremembering it. If we're thinking about this from almost like a finals MVP or Super Bowl MVP perspective, really Ronaldo, I think, is only, off the top of my head, got one definitely for Real Madrid, and that was against Juventus in Cardiff. He absolutely took that game by the scruff of the neck. And then you think about them beating Liverpool, it's Gareth Bale coming off the bench and scoring probably the best goal in the history of the tournament final. That's tough for you, but I mean, at least you got one next year, so at least you dry your tears with that. I believe I've got that timeline right. It was the year after you won it, wasn't it? Yeah, all good.
Yeah.
So you think about it from that perspective, I do think it's a little bit, his big game reputation goes before him. But you are right. He is always delivered in sort of Champions League, quarters, semis, general big games like that.
He got him there, basically.
Exactly.
It feels like he got him there.
Exactly. So is Lionel Messi. And Mbappe is right in there already in that conversation. And he's got the advantage of, we put a lot of cachet into the World Cups. It's so funny that we play these 60-game campaigns and these 7-game tournaments for last a month can have such a bearing, and the ability to win them is so dependent on where you're born, or in Haaland's case, where he was raised. We need to get a little bit smarter about how we judge players' international records as to where we rank them all time. But yeah, it's something that Mbappe has in his back pocket, and it's already like you don't have to think about it. Like, if he hadn't won one, and if he'd lost that final, we'd think, oh, can he win a World Cup? He's already got it. It's such a big relief for him that he can just get on with his career now that he has that. But it's very strange that we put so much stock into that stuff. But I get it, because it's such a big deal.
I mean, I just think about with Mbappe that the World Cup final against Messi, and yes, he ended up losing, but I mean, that France team is fantastic, and he just was miles better than everyone on that pitch, other than one man, Lionel Messi. And thank God Messi won the World Cup, because that, I feel like, really cemented his legacy for the naysayers. Just being 36, just having one of the most incredible runs in a tournament anyone's ever seen, and then winning it at that age is just incredible. Then going off in the sunset to Miami. But to wrap up this conversation, which is, Miami's great. Do you think it has to do more with longevity of how Mbappe and Haaland last in the next decade? Or do you think, even if they play 5 years less than Ronaldo and Messi played, but the stats are there and the medals are there, do you think that plays a factor? Or are we going to be judging football in the best in 5 to 10 years just completely different than we do now?
Yeah, there's certain layers of longevity, isn't there? There's longevity from the perspective of, Messi's last Ballon d'Or was this many years after his first Ballon d'Or. There's longevity from the perspective of, if he's still good for Miami in 3 years, it's like, look at him, he's this age, but he's still, playing at a decent level, doing really well. So there's those layers of longevity. I ultimately think that as an all-time great player, if you want to be considered the greatest, if you don't have a 5, 6, 7 year peak that you can put up with everyone else, then your longevity is just adding something to your career when you can be put up against, the players who are a little bit further down on that list. You think about maybe like Luis Figo and people like that who aren't considered the greatest of all time, but, obviously acknowledged as great players. If you don't have that 5, 6, 7 year peak where you are just ridiculously dominant and putting up numbers and winning trophies and things like that, you can play as long as you want and be as good as you want. I think it's that peak which really carries you more than anything else. And if Mbappe goes to Real Madrid and wins, 2 Champions Leagues in 3 years and wins each Ballon d'Or for those years, you pair that with his World Cup and you stretch that out to 2025, 2026, you're thinking from that kind of perspective, he would have one that you can put up against everyone else. Whereas if you think from the Haaland perspective, and this is, one of the things that he has to bargain with his own career, is that, let's say Manchester City in the next 3 years win each Premier League title, and I don't know, they throw at least 1, maybe 2 more Champions Leagues in there, and that's his kind of peak run. People look at it and say, yeah, I know that would make a lot of people really happy. But people will look at that and almost say, Rodri was the most important player, or maybe Foden graduates as the most important player, or, depending on how depending on not Gundogan, but obviously he's been important in what's been in the past, but from a big picture perspective, depending on how De Bruyne can hold up injury-wise, people look at this run. He's already been the most important player the last 5 years, but if he can carry on for a few years, they'd say, oh, he was the most important player. So that kind of divides those conversations. Like, can you be the best player and put together that kind of CV, so to speak? That's probably what Haaland's challenge is, and that comes from his restricted role. So I think that's almost the big thing here that we're coming away from, the sacrifice of Haaland's career to play this role for Man City versus what he could do in another team, showcasing everything else. It's a really interesting thing to think about, isn't it, when you get into the weeds of it?
And I don't think he's going to. I think he's going to move from City sooner rather than later. So it'll be interesting to see a different team with a different manager with a different style, maybe in a different league, how he adapts and how if he hits the ground running, which he probably will. He's already been in the Bundesliga and the Austrian league. Now the Premier League, he's completely taken over and smashed every record possible. So, I don't know if we came to a conclusion, which I didn't really think we'd come to. That's the point of philosophy. You don't know who's right and who's not. It's about having the conversation. So, Euan, thank you for having this conversation with me. I enjoyed it. It's always good to talk about the next generation and kind of what's going on now and what's really important. So thank you again, mate. And I'm sure we'll be seeing you soon.
Yeah, definitely. It's always fun to have these big picture conversations where there's no definitive answers or anything like that. Just kind of get deep into it. And I'm sure if we did this again in 2 or 3 years, we'd maybe have another name or two to throw in there as well. So it's one of the things that makes football fun.
Absolutely. Well, cheers, Euan. Take care.